Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we are talking with Caleb Warner. He is a manufacturing controls engineer for an ice cream company called Casper's up in northern Utah. It's a really great conversation about his job. And at the end, we even go into kind of some more generalized or generic advice about education and the beginning of your career. So be sure to stick around for that. As always, thanks for watching, and don't forget to share this channel with your career curious friends. Who are you and what do you do?
My name is Caleb Warner, and I'm a controls engineer for Casper's Ice Cream. I get to do a lot of things with both the engineering as well as controls. I get to program robots, I get to program PLCs, I get to engineer new devices to help us make ice cream better, and it's a good old time. So,
What's a PLC?
it stands for Programming Logic Controller. You can kind of think about it as like a breadboard or like a oh shoot, it's skipping my brain. Anyway, a small little microcontroller you can program. Typically does ladder logic, but line coding is growing more popular by the day in terms of what it can do. Uh, Basically, you just tell it for certain inputs or signals that you get, do certain things. Turn on a motor, turn on a light, that sort of thing. So
Okay. So I my undergraduate is mechanical engineering, so we can kind of talk way into the weeds if we want to during this conversation.
fair enough.
And also, we can keep it really high level too for people who are interested in learning about it or maybe just graduating from high school and don't know any of this stuff.
Gotcha.
I mean, like I was telling you before we started recording, when I first heard that there was such a job as an ice cream engineer. I mean, okay, fine, that's not your actual job title, right? But if you're basically a robotics or a controls engineer for ice cream manufacturing equipment, that sounds like the best job in the world to me. I don't know why I didn't ever get that job, but whatever. I mean, at least I have a friend who does it now. So, tell me, how did you even find out about this job? What's your educational background? How did you kind of find out about that?
So same as you, my educational background is mechanical engineering. I actually did an aerospace emphasis. All my life, I wanted to work on planes. But Casper's Ice Cream is notorious for Fat Boy ice cream sandwiches, and they have an outlet factory where you can get seconds. And growing up, my mom would buy them, and I would steal them out of our freezer. And so when I was going to college up in Logan, I was coming back from one summer, having worked summer down back home, and I needed a job. And I was like, I like those. I know that's up there. I've got warehouse experience. I bet I could apply and get a job. So I started making ice cream there actually while I was going to college. And then
Okay,
one
like as a
day
summer job.
sorry, what?
Like as a summer job.
Yep. Yeah, as a summer slash school job. So I was working
Okay.
during school. So
Okay.
they had a swing shift and it worked with my schedule. So I started making ice cream. And one day there was a guy there fixing a machine. And I asked him what he was doing. And he kind of gave me a vague answer. And because of my background, I kind of picked up a little bit. So I was like, oh, like this? And he was like, yeah, kind of like that. Anyway, turns out he was the plant engineer. And I just had never met him before. So had a few other instances meeting with him after that. And I was like, looking for an internship. If you want an intern, I'd be willing to, you know, to work with you here. And he was like, we'll see. Anyway,
Hmm.
one thing led to another, and I started interning there. And then after I graduated, they were still pretty small, so I don't think that they were like, we got an engineer, we're okay. So I ended up going off and doing aerospace engineering at Hill Air Force Base.
Okay.
And then COVID hit, and people ate a lot of ice cream. So they
Yeah.
blew up in size and in need and demand. And so my old boss that hired me before invited me back, and he was like, "I need some help. We're running like crazy here." So that's how I ended up back there as a controls engineer. So
Oh man, I just that explain. I've got so many questions here. This is going to be fun. So, the first question is, this seems cool. Like during COVID, this is one of the industries that really grew. There
yes,
were other people who were like losing their jobs and everything, but ice cream is one of those things that really grew because people were sitting at home eating ice cream all the time. Is that what
pretty
you're
much.
saying?
Yep, exactly. Yeah. And to put some perspective in, we sold um as much ice cream in the year of July of 2020 as we did in the entire year of 2018.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that it was a lot.
So here's maybe a higher level business question. How does that work? You said the plant was relatively small, but I've seen Fat Boys forever, everywhere. Do you guys make all the Fat Boy ice creams there, or
Yep.
is it one of many? Okay.
Yep. So there's technically two buildings at the same site, but for the long until let's see, 8 years ago, it was all just one old school building. So while as I was leaving, they were finishing their brand new building and expanding. And when they built that, they were planning to meet its capacity in like 15 years, and they made
Oh,
it in
okay.
6 in terms of bumping up the capacity that they anticipated for it. So that there's kind of your growth that they saw in that amount of time. But yeah, all Fat Boys come from those two factories or those two buildings in Richmond, Utah. So
Okay. Richmond, Utah. Do you know, do they distribute all over the country, or is this a kind of regional brand?
it used
I
to be regional for the longest time, but recently it's gone fairly national. So there's still a
okay.
couple states we're not in, but for the most part, I mean, we've got a contract with Sam's and Walmart, so we're in every single Sam's and Walmart across the United States, I believe. So,
Oh wow. Okay. Yes. So that is all the way across the nation.
oh,
I mean, growing up, I grew up in Boise, Idaho, so I knew what Fat Boys were. They were always there. It's close enough. And then when I went to Georgia for graduate school, they've kind of got their favorite thing. And then we moved to Texas for a while, so they've got their special ice cream. And I mean, eventually they're all kind of starting to come together or go across the nation.
mhm.
It's interesting because I never even considered that it started small and now it's really expanded like that.
Yep. Yeah, you
Okay.
can still see the original building. Actually, it's kind of funny. Like they just kept adding on. So yeah, it's kind of funny how the history you can see just from looking outside. But
Nice. One of those Franken buildings with
yep,
just
for sure.
additions. Nice. Okay, so now let's get nerdy for a second and tell me about the robots and the machines you use to make ice cream. How manual is this process, or is it like an auto factory where the robots are kind of doing everything? Are there still a lot of people working? How does that all work?
Yeah. So until fairly recently, it was mostly all done by hand. But yeah, now the processes that we've automated are kind of the process that were already automated before was kind of the cutting of the ice cream. That was always automated before.
Okay.
But now the picking up and placing onto wafers or the cookies that you've got on either side, that's automated. For all of our high speed lines is what we call them, our ones that run fast. They have robots that pick up the individual ice cream bar, usually through a vacuum and some fingers. They pick it up and then go put it into a bucket where it's your whatever pack size you are. If you're buying an 18 pack as a family or a small 6 pack for an individual or something like that, just places those. Our one line has two major FANUC robots, and the other one has 6 robots. They're all deltas. Delta robots are the ones that are upside down, so they're kind of hanging like a spider. Um,
Okay.
and those are the big processes that have been automated. And then just your cartoning. Those don't deal with robotics as much, but those are fully automated processes that just help pump ice cream out. So
Okay. So it's pretty much all those the wafer with the ice cream in the middle, right? That's
yep,
what you
yep.
guys do there. Okay. I've seen a couple of shorts of like the ones that do ice cream bars where it like sticks the stick in and then slices the ice cream off and then drops in the thing. And so what you're saying is the ice cream is kind of getting chopped off and then is it like going straight onto the wafer? Maybe I just need to come to the factory, man. I This is
You'd be
so
free to come.
cool.
I can give you a tour anytime. So
Okay. I went. It was awesome. No video recording allowed, unfortunately, but if you want to see some stock footage of some of their machines, you can go to caspersicecream.com, or I think they have a few YouTube videos as well. You can look for those. But finish the video first. Please finish the video first, or at least pause it and go to a different separate tab or something. Come make sure you finish the video.
let's see, right? Ice cream, we make it. It's almost like a liquid frosty consistency when we make it
Okay.
as our own fresh mix there on site. We're a little old school in how you make it. But anyway, in terms of some history on how ice cream tastes, so the creamier the ice cream, there's two major factors, right? So when ice cream feels creamy and smooth on your tongue, it's because the ice crystals are super tiny.
Okay.
And the ice grows easiest around fat globules. So, but the best ice creams have the highest fat content. So there's this balance between having as much fat in there as possible, but then making sure that you freeze it as quickly as possible so you give those ice crystals a small amount of time to grow. The best example I can think of is if you've ever eaten soft serve, how grainy it feels on your tongue.
Uh-huh.
Those are literally ice crystals on your tongue. But then when you eat something that's super like just light and fluffy on your tongue, it's because there's a lot of fat in it, and then they made it right by freezing it down quickly. So we've got big old freezers, just like your freezer at home. It's got a steel canister, and the ice cream goes through, and it's just got a sharp blade that's scraping it off the side as it goes through, and that extrudes it through a head, where then we've got a hot wire that's cutting it off, and that's going directly onto the wafer.
Okay.
Then it goes through a tunnel where it's at like negative 25, negative 40 degrees, ammonia cooled. Pops out on the other side, and it's really like hard as a brick. Like you could throw it across the room and it would shatter at the other end, kind of a
Yeah.
thing. Where then we've got a little transfer belt that, or sorry, a transfer machine that suctions up all of them, puts them on a belt to get wrapped in the individual wrapper that then you take out of a carton.
Okay. What is that wrapper machine? How does that work? Is it like
So
one long thing and then it folds it up and seals it and I don't know. How
yeah,
does that
yeah,
work?
kind of. So they all kind of come together, and it this is one of the hardest processes to do right because you're trying to literally wrap something around something and then cut it individually through. Um, So in this case, you insert the ice cream bar onto the wrap, kind of like this. You kind of have a transfer belt where the wrap comes up underneath it, and there's something pulling the wrap. And
Okay.
then you kind of flap it over on top of itself, and you've got two hot heated seals that seal it together as it goes through, and that's kind of what helps pull it. And then you've
Okay.
got a hot knife on the other side that sections off between each ice cream bar.
Okay. That's cool. And then the robot picks it up and puts it in the box. And
Yep.
then you have somebody come close the box and tape it up and
Actually, we've got a cartoner that closes
oh
the
great.
yeah, it's got a planetary gear, pulls the carton out through vacuum, puts it into a thing that folds out, and then glue guns glue it together as it gets compressed through. Those machines are pretty cool, actually. They're pretty clean to watch. They're built like a tank, but they run
Uh-huh.
a workhorse.
Nice. That's cool. This is one of those things like growing up on Mr. Rogers when you would watch the little let's go see how
Yep.
crayons are made or whatever.
Uh-huh.
All of these really cool machines that you just don't think about when you're opening up your ice cream bar. Who cares? It tastes delicious, right? But this is so interesting to me to find out how that all works. So, one other question, maybe about the business a little bigger. What does the supply chain look like before it gets to the factory? Are you guys like mixing the milk with the sugar, or are you getting kind of a pre-made solution? Are your wafers pre-baked, or you're doing all of that there too?
Yeah, so all the ice cream is homemade from the ground up. It's our own, you know, magical blend of stuff in terms of yeah, the Casper's proprietary recipe, I guess you could say.
Okay.
So yeah, we make the ice cream ourselves from the ground up. None of it is purchased anywhere else. It's all homemade, so to speak, just on a large scale. And then the wafers, those are baked somewhere else and purchased, but we've got a long, good standing relationship with who makes the wafers. So those have been the same for a long time.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, that's really cool. And so you got these giant ice cream mixer freezer things that you were telling us about. They go out and then they go through the whole process of getting wafers frozen, wrapped, and boxed, and then
Yep.
you ship them out. Great. Oh man, that's so cool. I'm so excited to come see it. This is going to be really cool. Okay, so let's talk about your job specifically then at work. Tell us what a controls engineer does, just kind of in general.
So a controls engineer mainly in the title controls, mainly it's things that control how things operate or what things do. You push a button, it's supposed to control something. You interact with the screen, it's supposed to do something. The controls engineer is the guy in the background that makes all of that happen. When I push the green start button, or when you push the start button in your car, it's the controls engineer that makes sure everything gets fired off, that your engine starts up, that your fan starts up, all that sequencing is done with a computer or with PLC on the background that was programmed by a controls engineer.
Okay. So, um, one thing I remember from my coding class in college was we were talking about code and how you might have to minimize if you got to be careful of how many lines of code or whatever. And kind of the default answer was, well, why would you ever need to do that? And the response was always, well, if you had to put it on a microcontroller. Which I mean, I've never programmed anything like that. I don't program things ever. I right now I'm a data scientist, and so I can use as much code as I want to kind of do what I need. Um, are you ever limited on things like that? Are you doing like firmware for a specific little piece, or is this kind of more larger scale programming? We just are getting an input and putting in an output.
It's actually a little bit of both. That's kind of why I think I find my job so fun is that I literally get to play with everything.
Okay.
So one of the reasons I was happy to come here and do this job, I loved working with airplanes, but it was a little slow in terms of I dealt with this one little cog, and here I
Hmm.
get to see things from prototype design to finishing it out. I get to do the whole design and engineering process. Um, so I do things, you mentioned data. I get to do things in terms of looking at a machine, analyzing its output, justifying what upgrades that I can do to it to help that output, and then showing the increases after doing it. I get to do that whole process. Um, Heck, even recently, I've convinced them to get a 3D printer, and I've been able to start modeling, developing our own parts for improvements that are kind of unique here and there. And um, that took a little bit to prove out, but I honestly, for the last 3 or 4 months or so, I've constantly had that thing printing because I got people coming to me daily in terms of, hey, could you print this? And so that's been a fun aspect of it that hasn't ended in terms of how it still applies to controls engineering. Um, I do get to program whole scale systems. Um, so, for example, we've got another ice cream bar that is in a very old building, and we kind of upgraded that. And I from the ground up started programming its facility systems in terms of how it controls how the ice cream gets made, how it gets transferred between places, how we're collecting data of all that stuff. Because you've got or state requirements of how you have to maintain that the ice cream was at good temperatures, didn't have any growths, pasteurized correctly, all those sorts of
Yep.
things. So
Yep. Okay.
all of that stuff from the ground up, I've been able to do whole scale. Um, the machines usually we purchase them, and they're done by the company that we purchase them. So usually my efforts on those are more fixing bugs, troubleshooting. But I have also prototyped a couple of our own systems that we use in house that I got to build from the ground up. So it kind of depends on what end of the scale you're on. I've got the opportunity that I get to do everything.
That sounds so fun. So is it still you and another plant engineer, or have you kind of taken over?
So as of right now, it's just me. I'm the sole engineer for all of Casper's ice cream. So
And is that is I mean, you're talking about how that's fun. Is that ever like a big weight on your shoulders? Ever really tough to be the one guy?
there are definitely times. I mean, they run 24/7 almost. So at this point, there's not really much else in terms of who they can call in the middle of the night. A machine run goes down, so sometimes that's not the best.
Yeah.
I was just on a family vacation 2 weekends ago, and I got a couple calls during it. So you're kind of never really off when you're a sole engineer, but it hasn't been too bad thus far. But the wife has definitely had moments of being like, "Are you serious right now?" So
Yeah. Do you do you have a boss then? Or is it pretty much you running your own thing?
I do have a boss. I kind of get to run my own department a little bit, but I do still answer to, our production VP because he oversees
Sure.
um,
Okay.
all of production in general. So I mainly assist him in making sure that we meet production goals and things like that. So,
Great. That's so cool. I have also worked in the aerospace industry, um, and I agree it is sometimes really slow, and especially if you're just sitting in front of your screen all day, it can be hard to kind of stay motivated when you have to just punch in exactly 40 hours every week. This
yeah.
sounds like, on the one hand, you have more responsibility, but since you're kind of the guy, you probably also have a little more flexibility to do what needs to get done and however you see fit to get it done. Is that right? Am I following?
Yep, for sure. My days, in terms of like asking how my days are, I've never had the same day twice. My days are never mundane, and I'm all right with that. Sometimes it is a little too much of putting out fires, but
Uh-huh.
there's usually once or twice a year that I pull maybe a 24-hour shift. I've done that a couple times where I had to
Ooh,
be there. for like 24 hours straight. But those are few and far between. And there's other benefits outside of that. So it doesn't happen super often, but it does happen every now and again. But yeah, I get to ping pong from projects as either there's a fire that needs to get put out, or I deem this one is more important, or I'm told, hey, actually, we want to move to this one. So I do ping pong a lot more than I would like sometimes.
Hmm.
Sometimes I get a little frazzled, jump between projects that often, but production is production. You got to do what you got to do to make sure that stuff comes off the belt. So.
Is there any tell us about a time that was just kind of weird or funny, or something that went wrong? I don't know. In my mind, I'm imagining an ice cream machine just like spitting out way too much ice cream, or I don't know. Do you have any weird, funny plant stories like that?
Yeah, actually, so one of the instances I'm thinking of when I was pretty much there 24 hours straight, it was one of our brand new robot machines, so the one that's got 6 robots on it, and there was an issue with the encoder. I guess for those that don't know, an encoder is just a computer that you put on the end of a shaft that measures how much it rotates, in super fine detail, so that you can know how much something moves from it. Um, anyway, so the two machines that this robot, they're kind of umbilical cord connected together because the robot's placed it into a bucket that goes directly into the Cartner machine where it gets
Okay.
inserted and glued. Anyway, the encoder was going bad on that machine, and it was causing the robots to uh, kind of guillotine the ice cream bars because they were off on where they were supposed to go. So we were lopping off the control heads, which are expensive in terms of they've got vacuums and their own control systems connected to them to control the vacuums as well as to rotate for picking up the bars and moving around. So that was a pretty problematic time because it wasn't just the encoder that was the major issue with it, but it caused a couple other issues down the line. So that's one where I can think of that, and it mainly would just stopped our production because we couldn't have stuff come out as quickly. Um, well, I mean, we're talking several hundred ice cream bars a minute is what we have coming
Yeah.
off the line with those robots. So before it was like maybe 60 to 100 in our old building, but yeah, now we've got hundreds of ice cream bars coming off every minute.
Okay. And so you had to get that encoder fixed as fast as possible so that you're not sending the entire thing to the factory seconds, right?
Pretty much,
The
yeah.
okay, the guillotined ice cream, as you were saying.
Yes.
That's great. Um, okay, cool. Let's talk now kind of how your job fits into your life. Obviously, I'm the kind of person who works to live, not living to work. So let's start. How much do you make?
Let's see. I currently make 95,000 a year.
Okay.
Um, but I can definitely say that is, is on the lower end of the whole spectrum. Obviously, as you get more experience, you're higher up. But controls engineers can kind of range quite a bit depending on your circumstances. But if you're a controls engineer that goes out to projects, you make a lot more simply because you're traveling. People usually need you quickly for projects. Where I'm a little more stationary, that's not as applicable. But yeah,
That seems like a great benefit.
it is.
Is that so? You're talking kind of for manufacturing controls engineers, where we're working with robots who are kind of doing some sort of manufacturing. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. What are some of the other benefits? I assume you've got some health coverage, or is this a small enough company that you're on your own for that?
Nope, I do have some health coverage. But all basic benefits do apply and come along in terms of retirement, 401k, health savings, all that kind of stuff. The biggest benefit for me actually is because there's that occasional, hey, you've got to be here for a long time. I do have the luxury of kind of taking off if necessary. Hey, my wife's having a hard day.
Sure.
I can kind of head home early a little bit as long as you still have my 40 hours every week. So that's the really nicety that I have is that I've got a lot of luxury with my schedule in terms of making it be whatever I want it to be.
Yeah, that makes sense. Are you still kind of punching a time card? Is it technically being paid by the hour, so maybe you get overtime, or is this straight up salary? We
Nope,
just need
straight
to get it
salary,
done.
no
Okay.
overtime for me.
Yeah. Okay. That's how my job currently is too. That nobody's tracking my time and it just needs to get done whenever it needs to get done, right?
Yep, pretty much.
So, do you feel like this is a pretty stable or secure kind of a job?
Yeah, I would say moving forward, you're gonna see. a lot more controls engineers just in general. I imagine that it's probably one that not a lot of people know, but robotics are is probably the next biggest field in terms of comparing it to computers as it was 30 years ago. Robotics are definitely going to be a pretty big field, and that people can complain about robots replacing our jobs. The reality of how I see it is it just raises the bar of, okay, now you're not the guy picking up a wafer and putting it on an ice cream bar. You're the guy servicing a robot and
Yep.
programming it or helping it. So we're going to have so many needs for controls engineers and things like that moving forward that you're going to be just fine.
Yeah, I agree with you there, and that's a totally different conversation. Someday when we have enough subscribers, we can do a bonus episode and
Fair enough.
charge people money, and we can talk all about, okay, what's gonna happen? Are the robots can take over the world from a real robotics controls ice cream engineer, right?
Yes.
That sounds like a great conversation to have. Are okay, so how often are you like sitting in front of a computer actually writing code then? I should have asked you this earlier.
Um, let's see. It does kind of depend, but I would say probably 65% of the time I'm sitting in front of a computer programming. The rest of the time I'm either wiring something, physically installing something, or in a meeting planning a design or an upgrade, or doing data analytics on stuff to justify a project. A
Okay.
lot more recently, pro modeling has taken up some of that, so maybe that would be like 55% in terms of recency bias from that. But
Okay. And do you use generative AI like ChatGPT to help you write code?
I haven't really. I've got a coworker that uses it all the time, and maybe I'm just a little old school. Uh, but I don't know. It's just never something that's crossed my mind yet in terms of, oh, I should just have this write it for me. I've had a coworker try it for me a couple times, and I usually spit the code out and it doesn't work, and I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't want to go through its whole thing. I'll just write it from the ground up myself. But that is definitely a tool that I need to start using more often because it is very applicable.
So what languages are these control codes written in?
So predominantly you've got ladder logic. It's called ladder logic because it looks like a ladder rung. You've got rungs that have conditions on the front that say, hey, if this is true or open, or if this button was pushed, do this thing on the other end. So predominantly all PLCs are ladder logic. You do have kind of line coding. That's called structured text. That's usually stuff that you do for more high-speed things. Ladder logic is rather slow in terms of communication. Um, so our Delta robots, they're all structured text in terms of how they're programmed because you just need to run a lot faster with
Okay.
telling them precision, trying to pick up ice cream, put it in a bucket quickly.
Yeah. And that's interesting because I haven't really ever heard of either of those languages, but it makes sense that the firmware on the actual hardware that you're running would have specific things that it can do. And so it has kind of its own sort of language, this ladder logic or whatever, that fits to that. Where I'm just thinking, well, I use Python for everything. Python can do everything, right? And I guess that doesn't really apply here. Maybe you could hack it, but yeah,
Yeah,
probably
I would say structured text is very similar to Python. I do
sure.
program in Python quite a bit for a lot of our other data stuff. I don't know if you've ever heard of Ignition. Ignition is basically a smart home program for an entire warehouse facility. So I
Okay.
do a lot of programming in Python using that. But yeah, structured text is pretty similar to Python.
If somebody wants to become a manufacturing controls engineer, what do we do? What do you need to do? What kind of education do you need? Who's a good person for this job?
Um, well, it's actually, so most high schools nowadays have some sort of technical college tied to them. Cool thing in Logan, you've got Bridgeland Technical College or BATC, and they will let high schoolers come and you can get a certificate in PLC programming for free while you're in high school if you just want to do it on the side. I had an intern just last year who was graduating high school, and he had way more experience than I had when I was 18 years old. So there's a lot of stuff like that out there in terms of even if you're just in high school and want to get into it. I mean, he graduated from college and could have easily walked into a job getting 75 to 85K a year right out of being 18 years old. But in terms of if you're post high school, Again, there's usually technical college, but if you go to any university for manufacturing engineering or for just mechanical engineering, both of those will definitely dip into those controls realms. Um, FANUC will do their own trainings. You can just sign up online if you don't want to go to university, and they cover a little bit of PLC programming, but also just you can program robots from the Teach Pennant. You don't ever need a PLC to do it. You can do it all from just a little handheld device, and you can just sign up for those courses whenever you want to. Just get certified, just online. So
Fanuc is the company that builds the robots.
yes, yeah,
Okay.
they're the world's largest robot manufacturer. You've got a couple other brands. ABB is another big one. Um, but predominantly Fanuc is the largest scale one. So
So it sounds like you could be a competent and good controls engineer, manufacturing engineer with a technical degree. You don't even necessarily need to get a bachelor's degree. Is that right?
yeah, definitely. Most places, if you're looking, they're saying, hey, a 4-year degree or certificate. Allen Bradley or Rockwell Automation is the United States' largest PLC um, software. The rest of the world uses Siemens
Okay.
PLC programming. They're both fundamentally the same in terms of ladder logic and things like that, but they both run very differently. Um, Rockwell is kind of a US based company, so they've got kind of a hold on the United States, but the rest of the world uses Siemens. So you could go either of those routes, and in some ways, Siemens is making a really hard push to invade the US because that's kind of the one place that they're not dominant in. Um, but Rockwell struggles in the rest of the world, so they're kind of trying to hold fast to the
Sure.
United States. But there is some preferential there. But if you know one, you can pick up the other one fairly quickly.
Yeah, those German engineers, man.
Yep.
Um, so that's good to know. I've experienced a similar thing with CAD. Once you learn how to do CAD, I was trained in CATIA, which is a French software, which is all across the world. And I just because I happened to sign up for that section of the class. But since then, I've had to use a couple others, and it's pretty easy to kind of figure your way around once you have experience with one.
Yep. I would say that's a great example.
Okay, this is really interesting. One thing, we're both in Utah. One thing I think a lot of people really don't recognize is that any high schooler in Utah can essentially go to any technical college in Utah for free, like
Yep.
absolutely 100% free. And you're essentially graduating high school with a technical certificate, a technical degree, sometimes even an associate's degree which makes you completely fully prepared for the
Yeah.
workforce in whatever place it is, right? If you decide you want to grow and maybe you need a bachelor's degree after that, great. Now it's only 2 years, right? Anyway, I that's one thing I just wanted to point that out again because here in Ogden, it's the Ogden Technical or OTech.
Hmm.
And then also just through Weber State right here,
Yep.
there's a lot of concurrent enrollment opportunities here. Um, which just seems so awesome. And even if you're planning to get a bachelor's degree or even beyond that, why not have this fully employable skill when you graduate high school? Even if you're just working after your college classes, you're making a grown-up salary, right? It's
Amen.
not it's not flipping burgers for minimum wage during college, right? You're making a full salary and sometimes your company will even help pay for your college. Anyway,
Yep. Yeah, if
there
I was hitting the reset button, that would, I could be coming out of high school looking pretty set for life. Because even if I did want to, like I said, I could come out of high school making 75, 85K a year. If you're a manager at a fast food restaurant, you're maybe hitting 50, 55K a year, and that's, with not great fast food conditions in terms of
uh-huh.
of how that goes. So, yeah, if I could hit the reset button and redo high school, there's so many more opportunities nowadays than there was for me. I had I had a class that you could opt into in high school that was how to program Palm Pilots. That was the only like alternative in school that I had. So
Yeah.
now that you can basically graduate high school with an entire technical degree in multiple things, it's pretty sweet. STEM has come a long way in terms of pushing itself into uh, being cool and being available for everybody. So. That would
Yeah.
definitely be my advice to anybody. If you like to tinker with Arduinos, if you like, breaking apart a cell phone to see how it works or some other toy that you broke an RC car, all of those things deal with controls. All of those things deal with electricity and circuits and programming and controls is right up your alley.
That sounds so great. I agree. if I was a high schooler today, I would spend a lot less time doing whatever I was wasting my time with, and I would be like doing welding classes after school
Yep.
or something. Actually, that's not, I would probably be doing the controls engineering stuff. I feel like that'd be more fun, but we haven't interviewed a fast food manager yet. It's on the list. We haven't interviewed a welder yet. It's on the list. We'll see. One thing, just to make sure nobody misunderstands here, we're not dissing on working in fast food, especially in college. I've
Yes.
heard that McDonald's actually has really good uh, scholarships for even just workers. I think the managers get maybe a little bigger scholarship, but even just
Hmm.
workers get free money for college while they're working. Anyway, just as a side note there.
For sure. Yes. Not dogging on it. Just, hitting the stereotype, I guess, of coming out of high school and picking up a fast food joint job. So,
Yeah, well, work in fast food when you're a freshman and sophomore, and then get going on your technical degrees, right? Start earning real grown-up money.
yep.
Okay, great. So let's see. I think we've covered most of the stuff that I wanted to talk through today. Is there anything that I haven't asked you about that you think is interesting to know about your job or your career path in general?
Um, if you're gonna give me a soapbox, I'll preach.
Great,
Um,
preach.
mainly just if you're interested in something, find someone who does it and shadow them. That was the advice that I think I could have asked for the most post graduation. I had a really good group of kids that I had all throughout college, and 6 months before, not even 6 months, 3 months before he graduated, one of my study buddies was like, I think I'm realizing that I didn't want to be a mechanical engineer. I wanted to be an electrical engineer, right? And he's 3 months away from graduating, right? That's a little too late to be having that realization, and not that it's the end of the world. But you can learn a lot about a job just by shadowing it for one day. I had a cousin who thought he wanted to do aerospace engineering, and I was able to let him come and shadow me for a day. And by the end, he was like, "Yeah, I like this and this." He was like, "But I realized that I don't actually want to do that," and helped him on his career path in a way that he had no idea when he was just in high school. So I would say before you start wasting money in college for generals, not wasting, but you can spend a lot of time just spending money on generals, and counselors will usually tell you, well, to get your generals done, and then you can decide from there. And that's how they make money. Their job is to make you graduate, but the longer they keep you in school, the more money the university makes. So I would say stay out, shadow someone, find a job you want to commit to, and then you can run to it.
I love it. The one of the main points of me putting this channel together is that's advice that I've heard a lot is find somebody who has the job that you're thinking about and talk to them about it.
Hmm.
And where I grew up, I lived in a neighborhood where all of our neighbors and my friends' dads and moms had a whole bunch of different careers. And so that was easy for me to do. If there was someone doing something I was interested in, I just call up my friend and say, "Can I talk to your parent or whatever?"
Hmm.
A lot of people may not have that, which is the reason why I'm trying to kind of combine or compile all of these interviews is to let people have like a dip a toe in the water and at least find out what do these people even do. And then I agree with you. If you can find somebody who has that job and actually sit down with them or follow them to work, as I'm really excited to do with you,
Hmm.
um, I mean that's where you can really learn what goes on every day.
Yep. The only last advice I would give is if you are interested in something, go look for job applications of that job, even if you don't qualify, and you can start reading the requirements. And those are the kinds of things that if you're in college or in high school, you can start playing with. More and more colleges are caring less, or people that hire are caring less and less about where your degree came from and what you did on the side to tinker and play, because those are the people that are like, ah, you got your hands dirty. Everyone has the same education pretty much coming out of the gate from college. It's what you did on the side that really sets you apart. So if you're
Yeah.
if you're interested in a job or interested in something, you can look up salaries by just looking up jobs on Indeed or something like that, as well as see the requirements, and that's what you can do on the side to make yourself stand out.
That's it. Thanks for watching. Thanks again to Caleb for the great interview and for taking us on a tour of the factory. We still have some of our factory seconds in the freezer. Um, if you're enjoying this content, again, I would really appreciate it if you share it with some of your friends who are curious about different careers, or if you can like and subscribe. That's always really helpful for the channel as well. please stick around. We've got some great interviews coming up, and also the video quality is about to get a lot better. Thanks for watching.